You are listening to the Small Town Big Arts podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirshner, the CEO of the Academy Center of the Arts in Lynchburg, Virginia. In my own work as an arts leader, I have found it difficult to access resources for arts organizations and artists serving smaller communities. On each episode, Small Town Big Arts sets out to drive conversations and provide inspiration for those serving smaller communities through the arts. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us and share with your friends and colleagues who are working to promote the arts in smaller communities across America. You can also learn more by visiting us at smalltownbigarts.com. Well, I am very excited to return to the podcast, and the inspiration for this came out of a recent National Arts Strategies program that I participated in, which is essentially group leadership coaching, is what I'll call it. And I had the fantastic opportunity to meet Lori McKinney during this time. And Lori McKinney is one of the founders of the RiffRaff Arts Collective in Princeton, West Virginia. And I was really inspired by the work that they're doing there. It's pretty incredible. And it's definitely something that should be on your radar. And so we're going to have a chance to talk to Lori a little bit today about what they're doing in Princeton, what makes it special, and how you might be able to draw some inspiration from this as well. So Lori, thank you so much for joining us here on Small Town Big Arts. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm always eager to dive into a conversation like this.
Yeah, and we've had a chance to talk a little bit already in a cohort of I think about 5 or 6 arts leaders. I guess it was 5 of us. And one of the things that Lori and I definitely connected on is that we are coming from smaller communities, and this is unique. And we'll probably talk a little bit today too, a little bit about some of the changing, evolving landscape that's happening to the funding around the arts right now. And we'll probably also talk a little bit about culture and politics just a bit. But I think before we get into any of that, for those who may or may not be familiar with Princeton, West Virginia and the Bluefield micropolitan region, tell us a little bit about where you live and a bit about the community.
Yeah, great. So Princeton, West Virginia is my hometown. I grew up here, but I actually went to school in my earlier years of home were in Green Valley, which is between Bluefield and Princeton. And so Mercer County has a population of about 60,000. I know sometimes rural numbers can be misleading. Princeton's population is under 6,000. I think we're sitting at about right at 5,800 right now. But of course, the city limits are pretty narrow, and the audience and the community that we're networked with and draw upon for our programming is definitely in the small towns that exist in this broader region or area of Mercer County.
Yeah, and I think that's an important note to make, because many of us who live in smaller communities really understand that this idea of the micropolitan community, right, in which we may live in a county, but very often there is some larger population center or centers, right, that we gravitate to and around as we engage in culture and pick, activities of leisure or engagement, right? And so definitely a dynamic there that's wider than the town of Princeton, but still Princeton is a pretty unique, incredible place. So Lori, tell me a bit about the founding of the RiffRaff Arts Collective. It's really pretty special, and how it came about and where it is now is a really great story. So tell us a bit about its genesis.
All right, thanks. I'll try to be brief when I speak about the origin of the RiffRaff. It naturally goes to the personal origin story of myself and my partner in all things, Robert. And I could dive deep into that, and it's always a little bit challenging to to give the concise version, but I'll just say that growing up in a small town, I just was very eager to get out and see the world. I was really hungry for creative opportunities. We had great music and arts programs in our schools, but beyond that, there wasn't a lot to dive into beyond like the very traditional kind of dance studio or choir programs or things. I really loved show choir. I also played tennis.
Yeah, I was a show choir kid too. I remember those days.
I was actually recruited from a show choir competition for my jazz hands, the way that an athlete would be recruited.
Nice.
on either majoring in tennis and English or going into the arts field. And it was actually that fated show choir competition that the director of the Madisonians at James Madison University, I really fell in love with that program. And so I ended up picking the major music theater just kind of because I knew I loved to sing and dance, but I didn't have any exposure to Broadway or, any of that. When I went to JMU, I was in school with kids from Northern Virginia, New York City, and they knew every Broadway musical ever written. And I just kind of knew it wasn't the right fit for life. Somebody suggested I study abroad and went to London. And I spent my senior year. I was actually working at Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee in the summer of '99. And then my fall semester was in London. So it was a very interesting like culture shift from
I love that. Yeah. I love the
London.
juxtaposition of that.
Yeah, it was really interesting, but my mind was just blown seeing the way that was the first city I ever spent any extended period of time in, seeing the vibrancy of London and the way that people just buzzing about in all these colorful spaces. Of course, travel is really affordable when you're already over there. So some girlfriends and I went to Athens, Greece, and we took a ferry over to Italy and rode a train up to Rome, and I just had coming of age epiphanies. I stood in the ancient amphitheaters in Greece and I pondered the way that the ancients used the arts to teach virtue and rule society. I
Mm.
met some young artists who were creating music festivals on the borders of warring nations in the Middle East. And there were just like formative moments that showed me the way that arts and creativity can be used. And I kind of at that point knew that I was searching for something, that I was seeking like my life path. And was in Rome, went into the Vatican, light shining through the windows, and I was very like intentionally seeking, how can I work for a greater good, something bigger than myself?
Mm.
And so I came back home with this big open heart, and I remembered that I'm an artist, I'm a writer. I actually am meant to be writing. And around that same period of time, I just had this melody and lyric that just started pouring through me. And anytime I'd hear guitar chords strums, I would have a melody and a lyric that would just come to me. And so I started going to open mic nights, and I met a poet in a neighboring town. I had my journey just sort of led me back here to visit my sister who was going to a local university. I met a poet through her and traveled down, and the poet and I were traveling outside to other towns, like an hour away to go to open mic nights. And I remember one day we were getting ready to travel an hour away and we pulled over on the side of the road, and we always looked over this big, beautiful, it was called Mount Zion, and the river, the new river beneath it. And we just had this aha moment, like, why don't we start an open mic night here?
Love it. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the genesis. And it's sure enough, Robert's younger brother started coming to the open mic, and he told Robert about the open mic. And Robert was like, what's an open mic? He'd always wanted to delve into creative avenues, but he never had the opportunity. And he came to open mic night, and the rest is history with us. We
Yeah.
connected at open mic night, and a part of our story is that we've been running open mic night together ever since. That was 22 years ago, and open mic night is like how we met a lot of the contacts that formed the foundation for all of our current work.
Yeah, and I love this too because one of the things that's really critical in arts delivery in smaller communities is collective action and building a network, which can in some ways be a bit easier in a smaller community in some regards, but it can also be difficult too. People can be scattered, and they need something to call them together and bring them together. And an open mic night is a really smart tool. So I would just sort of say for folks as you're trying to figure out how to formulate community or create a siren sound, right, for people to gather, something like that, a platform, right? An open platform where people can come and share work is a really great way to do that. So you and Robert, your partner in business and life, set out, start this thing up. It has been through a number of chapters too. You all are started off as an open mic, and that still continues too, as I understand, right? It's a big component of what you all still do. But tell us the expansiveness of what RiffRaff Arts Collective is today, because it's pretty impressive. And I'll share a website in the podcast notes so you can go and see all the things that they have and do. It's pretty amazing. So tell us about that.
Thank you. And I will say that I think one of the cornerstones of the way this is all played out is that we've started programs and we've kept them. So we like to create traditions and keep them. And so with open mic, it's been going on for 22 years. The first thing that we did after
Mm.
that was we started an Earth Day festival, which is still going on today in April. Then we launched Culture Fest World Music and Arts Festival in 2004, and the idea was informed by the global perspective that I gained during the years that I spoke of,
Yeah, I
and
love
also,
that.
Robert and I both shared this perspective that, a lot of our problems, whether political, social, all of them a lot of them come back to, xenophobia. And when we're afraid of change and afraid of what's different, it can really block progress. And, if you're living in a small rural town, oftentimes you're just not exposed to, many cultures beyond what,
Yeah,
you've seen. And we can't really fault, can't assign fault in that. And so the idea with Culture Fest World Music and Arts Festival is to bring a multicultural experience right into the heart of Princeton.
that's
So we
great.
launched in our city park for 2 years, and then we discovered the Appalachian South Folklife Center in Pipestem. So we broadened it to a 4-day immersive world music and arts experience with workshops, kids activities, facilitated discussions. And actually just last year we brought it back into our neighborhood. But Culture Fest. Then in 2006, we had the opportunity we knew we needed our own space. We wanted that special energy that was created during Culture Fest to last year round. In college, I had learned about collaborative spaces where different artists of different disciplines share space, tools, and resources. And we were actually thinking about renting a space, and the opportunity presented itself for us to go in and actually buy a building in our downtown. Now, Mercer Street had been left behind like so many downtowns across the country, and it had a dark cloud hovering over it. It was about 80% vacancy, but we had that vision that artists are off to do, and we saw it
Yeah.
like a blank canvas. There wasn't any historical population that was here. In this downtown, it was mostly vacant. There were, some residents, but there was a lot of turnover, so there wasn't anyone that was rooted here for as far as residential goes. So it truly was like an opportunity to build anew, of course, hearkening to the glory days of the past, with the department stores and the commerce,
Yeah,
and the
where the
heyday.
downtown was where everybody went.
Yeah, but we planted roots in this building that I'm sitting in right now in 2006, and established the RiffRaff Arts Collective with the art gallery downstairs, artist studios on the second floor. And this is the room upstairs where a lot of music has happened, a lot of community gatherings. And
I love it. You can
2008,
feel it. You can feel it looking at it too. You know, that room has seen a lot of magic, I have no doubt.
yes, you notice. Yeah, you can feel them when
Tell,
you're here.
tell me
Uh,
a little bit because the downtown, was at one point thriving. Tell me a little bit about about the industries of Princeton, past, present, and maybe future.
Yeah, Princeton's a railroad town. And so, of course, it was in the supply chain of the coal industry. So it wasn't directly coal impacted where there were not mines actually here in Princeton, but the railroad, of course, is tied to that industry. We had manufacturing here. We had a Maiden Form, which is women's garments. And we also had a wood processing plant called the Dean Company that was an international company. And our hospital is one of our main employers. So uh, today, the manufacturing, some small scale manufacturing is actually looking to make a comeback through some really strong entrepreneurship that's happening. Just a couple nights ago, we had a made to measure women's apparel entrepreneur that planted roots here 4 years ago give her presentation on some research that she's doing about retooling the textile industry, harkening back to maiden form. So pretty
Huh.
excited about that. I think like the possibilities are starting to really open up here. Um,
Yeah, I found in my time doing this that there's a lot of communities in Appalachia that are uh, really becoming dynamic. Some of the success stories that exist, right, are in these communities where people have sort of identified cheaper real estate, right, setting up camp. I want to actually touch on the real estate really quick before we kind of get back to Princeton and the ecosystem around you. Um, the has the real estate can be tricky, right? Facility depreciation is tricky. And sometimes, right, in larger markets, real estate ownership can is not always the route to go, right? Always. It can be sometimes, but it's not always the route to go. What have been the benefits and maybe even some of the pitfalls of owning the facilities you all are occupying?
So we did get in on the ground level. We were the visionaries, and everyone told us we were crazy for investing in this way. But we knew we were doing all of this work for the good of the world around us. And it turns out it was a long-term real estate investment. I think several years into it, we started to recognize that the investment that we were making was going to be more than social impact and was actually going to turn out to make dollars and cents in the long run.
Yeah.
But you've seen stories like Asheville or places that were maybe down on their luck and that were inhabited by artists. They build up the neighborhood and they get priced out and have to leave. So the revitalization cycle can be like a toxic cycle where artists move to a place and they have to move. And here, that's not happening because we own our property, and the gallery across the street, Holler owns, and then the coffee shop building where we have our coffee shop, that's actually cooperatively owned, which is a great strategy that we're
Oh,
experimenting
interesting. I want to get
with.
back to that later too. I want to hear more about that, but keep going.
Yeah, and so that we've built this neighborhood from being a place that no one wanted to come to a thriving cultural district. And normally this point in the story where the artists get priced out. But in our version of the story, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, you own it, and you push the property value up. So it's that's great. That's
It's
awesome.
interesting. It is like there's a whole conversation. We could do a whole podcast about that, about
Yeah.
the trickiness of the real estate values and how, the balance of that, because, some of the properties are held back from developing the full transformation because now the building owners have raised their prices because of the
Yeah.
perceived value. And it's kind of frustrating because, the people that have rolled up their sleeves and done what, it's kind of like the dirty work. And now there's people that want to cash in at the highest dollar value and they're
Yeah.
holding
Yeah.
back the transformational work. So that's a lot in that.
Yeah, well that'll there'll be a lot of people that will speak to and they'll hear that. It's really common in smaller communities for people to be sitting on real estate and waiting for some sort of payday and it can be extraordinarily frustrating when you've done all this work and then they're holding back they're holding back the community development based on their own sort of personal financial interests. And it's always helpful. I've found that and I have recommended this to folks at points. There are ethical developers out there, right, that are really interested in making their community a better place. And I always say that when you can identify and find those developers where you live, those are folks to link into and work alongside because they will help you navigate that, right, where people are sitting on properties, not having the greater good in mind. Um, but kudos to you all for creating value there. I mean, it's so obvious what you all have done. The festival model is also really great. I want to say the open mic, the festivals, right? The festivals are again, you've been really smart, as you mentioned. It's tradition, right? It's a thing that we can expect to happen. We can return back to it. The value is really clear, right? People can the local government can boast about it. They can engage. Um, so that's actually, I think maybe the next part where I kind of want to get into a little bit is the structure of how it financially works. And I know a little bit from our conversations with National Art Strategies, you all have positioned yourself where you are and what you're doing to be valuable to some national funding organizations who have an interest in supporting more rural cultural development. So, and we'll talk a bit about that. Before we do, let's talk a little bit about what the funding structure looks like for you right now. You mentioned you have a co-op component. You guys have a coffee shop. Is there ticket components? Are you receiving funds from local government? How is everything breaking down for you?
So from the very beginning of this work, when we first started out, we always looked at it like a patchwork quilt. Even from the very beginning, we were piecing things together. Like when Robert and I first started, I would substitute teach and he would take sound jobs and we would piece it all together. And those were the days when we were really literally digging change out of the couch cushions and like self-funding everything.
Yeah, yeah,
And bit by bit, one piece I didn't mention was in 2013, our state's lucky to have the West Virginia Community Development Hub, and we were able to team up with our city and various community partners to enter into a strategic planning program, which was like a more multifaceted downtown development planning process. And we've walked alongside the hub for all these years. And what that did was just open us up to a lot of more mainstream opportunity, and it got us training wheels with grants. So they would have like a $2,000 mini grant and they'd say, hey, we want you to create a project for this $2,000. We launched amazing programs like the Downtown Countdown, which is now our 15-year tradition of our multi-stage music and arts festival on New Year's Eve with the ball drop and fireworks. And we, pitched that to the hub for the mini grant, and they were like, this is a very different use of a mini grant. But it was paradigm shifting. It wasn't just a party on New Year's. It was
Hmm.
the paradigm of our community. But our partner Community Connections, which is an established family resource network in our community, they were our nonprofit partner. And so they acted as a fiscal agent. And so from a $2,000 mini grant to, a $5,000 mini grant to, a $10,000 grant, and started getting into more and more programming that was walking alongside Community Connections as our fiscal agent and in partnership because we had shared priorities. So it was actually a very harmonious fiscal agent relationship. And then we, grew and grew and grew. And we were building all this foundation and all this programming. And then in 2019, actually, one of our core supporters said, hey, we think it's time for you all to go ahead and start your own nonprofit. And in the very beginning of our work, there was a peer assistance network with our state arts commission. They sent a peer assistance advisor down to us, and it was just myself, Robert, and one other artist. And he said, please don't tell my colleagues I told you this, but it's going to be smarter for you all to start a business right now. If I was sitting in a room of 10 people, I would say, yeah, y'all need to start a nonprofit. But right now, you're going to be able to move more deftly and swiftly if you just start a business. And he was so right. So we started a production LLC, Lineum Entertainment, and we
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
still maintain that LLC today. So it's a social enterprise model where the production company
Ooh,
handles certain
okay.
aspects of it, like sound and lighting. And a lot of times, if there's sometimes the nonprofit contracts the LLC for production work or various aspects where, an LLC and a business can operate in different ways, sets of ways. The non
Tell me more about that, right? Because we are all stuck in
Mhm.
this nonprofit way of thinking in regards to arts delivery in America. And I'm very intrigued, right? Because I think we are in desperate need of other models. As we see right now, right, we are very prone to political change, prone to the whims of donors, et cetera. So tell me a little bit more about some of these LLC advantages that you have over the nonprofit.
I would want to back up to just for 1 second before we move
Mhm.
on to that and tell you that, we looked at it like a patchwork quilt from the very beginning. And now in our 22-year kind of maturity, we have a very broad variety of revenue streams. So we've got our earned revenue,
Yeah.
our video production services, and our coffee house revenue, and the gallery, and a lot of different sort of earned revenue. We've got
How many entities do you have in total?
just two. We
Just two.
have like we
Okay.
yeah, and RiffRaff Arts Collective is a nonprofit with a whole board of directors, and it has a
Yeah.
whole structure. It's like an institution. And then over here, there's the production LLC that is just an entertainment production company that, is not always leading, but is just able to be contracted for various aspects of production work. Um, Now we
And
have,
isn't beholden, right? I mean, there's obviously advantages, right, to the 501c3. So I want to say that too, right? There's all kinds of funding that you're going to qualify with that 501c3. There's a lot of things oriented around being mission based as opposed to for-profit based. But the LLC, I imagine, as you mentioned, gives you a lot of latitude, right? You can shift and move and do different things with it that you couldn't maybe do with the nonprofit. So you kind of are getting the best of both worlds a little
and
bit
it's
of what you're
interesting.
trying to patch to work together, correct?
Definitely. The LLC is all it is very mission driven, and it could very well be a nonprofit into itself because it's so mission driven and it's more about the community impact than it is about the profit, but in structure as an LLC. And we looked at
Yeah.
Benefits Corporation as a structure, but we were advised by some mentors early on that it wasn't worth it to like go into the complexity of building that B Corp to it was just better to just keep it in an LLC structure. But we
And you
have
said social enterprise is the
I've heard a lot of coaches talk to us about the social enterprise model, and someone early on explained it to me. Look at the symphony orchestra or a ballet for, or a dance studio. You've got like the Princeton Dance Studio, which is the for-profit entity. It is a fee-for-service entity and it operates as a business. But then you've got the Friends of the Princeton Dance Studio, which is the
Mhm.
nonprofit arm, and it supports and works in tandem with the for-profit business.
Yeah, yeah, super smart. And when I was looking, when you visit the RiffRaff website, one of the things that's really clear, I sometimes refer to it as product lines. It's one of the things that we say here at the Academy when we think about our different means of mission delivery and then sort of the buckets that our revenue comes through, right? So for us here, we have five. We always say we have five product lines. And I can tell, right, when you go to the RiffRaff website, it's pretty jaw-dropping because it's pretty clear, right, that the diversity of revenue opportunities is part of the trick here. At the same time, that can be exhausting.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that because I think it's very smart to diversify in that way because it leaves you a lot less exposed to a single donor or a shift in art buying, right, or whatever. But it allows you to kind of dip and dive and move with what is working at any given moment. But there are there is only one you. So tell me how that goes. And it's okay if it's not all great. I think we want to kind of talk through the realities, you know.
So Robert and I, so Robert is a lot of times people attribute so many of the things to me, like the visual aspects and technical aspects. Robert is the wizard behind the curtain on all the technical things, and I would love to clone Robert, and unfortunately, technology has not caught up with the ability to do that at this point. But it
Maybe
our
soon,
first
but yeah.
our first, oh right, our first major grant funded program was Create Your State, where we share our story of transformation and share tools and strategies. And we visited 25 West Virginia towns with this touring program. And, where we act as mentors in an ongoing basis for communities. And I've been conflicted sometimes thinking, should we be telling other people to follow in our footsteps? Because
Yeah.
we have it's not been healthy at very lots of
Yeah.
times we've just been we're over pushing ourselves. And but people who love us, or at first glance people might say, well, why don't you stop doing this program, or why don't you pull back on this? And it's like we're not ready to let go of any of the elements because it's all a symbiotic ecosystem and each piece feeds the other. And so rather we are moving towards that moment when we can raise our capacity and be properly staffed. And we are hot on the trail of that moment. And all of the things that we've put together, all the programs are manageable, totally manageable. We just need the right amount of team members with the right set of skills and the roles. And we know we can do it. And we're just not going to relent unless we absolutely have to. And so
So are the barriers workforce or are the barriers financial or are they both?
it's both because we
Yeah.
know the people. We just
Yeah.
don't have
Okay.
the funds. Like for Robert, unfortunately and fortunately, you may have noticed that like a lot of the things that we do are kind of high tech from what like the video production side of things is like really it's cinematic quality. It looks like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
production house, but that's all done in-house. And almost all of it is just done by Robert. And so we've got really great production and technical like craftsmen and women and crafts people that we contract for events and for different projects. But day to day, it's all hinging on Robert. But it's the kind of thing where the kind of worker that we need is just very expensive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Because
so
it's so specialized.
yeah, a lot of times people are just like, well, why don't you just get interns or why don't you use, and it's just way
Yeah. Well,
more.
how many times have we all heard that, right? Yeah. If you just get an intern, it's like, yeah, sure. Right. We could have a whole podcast on that. So where Mercer County, Princeton, Bluefield, how is the community trending right now in terms of growth and forward trajectory, right? I mean, small towns let's say small towns in West Virginia and the Valley of Virginia, right, are kind of all over the map, right, in regards to who is flourishing, who is suffering, who, right, it's all over. So where is it trending for you all right now as you sort of look forward to this future where you're trying to get to that next step where you can bring in other folks to expand your workforce?
It's so interesting. I feel like it's all relative, and you could interview like five different people sitting in five different places, and they'd give you five different stories, just based on their perspective. For the riffraff, we are really in a growth moment, and we are looking at this year, I believe, is the year that we're going to be able to staff up and hire an executive assistant, a communications outreach coordinator, and Robert will have a more robust ability to bring in production team. But this has been like 22 years in the making of where we're at in this growth moment. And our video production side of things is really growing. And, we've got such a great network in the community development sphere. So from the riffraff perspective, we're trending in a great growth trajectory. We are like all small towns. We're getting people moving in from out of the area and from cities. Every day you meet somebody that's like, "Oh, I'm from California. I moved
Right.
here." And then
They're migrating. Yeah. Yeah.
people in the neighborhood, I feel like all small towns have a fishing net right now, and everybody has a different kind of color and flavor of fishing net. And ours in particular is we're getting a lot of people from what is that northern area of California that Humboldt County. Like we've had artists that are like in the neighborhood. They're
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, I know you. I heard you on NPR in Humboldt County." And it's like, what is happening? We're in
That's
Princeton.
interesting. Yeah, the
Yeah.
evacuation of yeah, it is uh we have Cardinal News here, which actually covers areas right over the border of Virginia to you, because they cover Southwest Virginia, and they do a lot of data analysis on what's actually happening in small towns. There's kind of like this general narrative of sort of evacuation, but what we're seeing right now is in places where something has been created, like what you all have done, right? And somebody gets online and is like looking for somewhere to go where it's affordable. There aren't constant forest fires, right? Where they see something like the Riffraff Arts, collective, and well, I can, there's going to be culture. There's clearly a community. I can watch footage, right, on your website of all these like interesting artists doing work, and I'm like, I could live there, right? And I could live there for half the price of where I live right now. So there are people moving into these communities. So it's not, it's much more complicated. And I would imagine one of the reasons your net is pulling in fish, as you've noted, is because of you all. I have no doubt in looking at it.
Well, thank you for the vote of confidence. I appreciate that. And also, it's like bigger than the sum of its parts because it becomes exponential. So when you go, we were the kind of catalyst, but then you go out the winter. We just had a grand opening for the Mercer Street Bicycle Co-op today, and they have their own sphere of people that they're attracting too. So
Interesting.
it's
Yeah.
like the circles are like, I think concentric is the word, and it's just exponential. So
So
yeah, a
is there
lot of people
tourism there too? Is there a tourism industry?
got beautiful nature around us and
Yeah.
waterfalls. In 10 minutes, I can be to three different waterfalls and state parks. And so, yeah, we've got a really great set of natural assets here. And the Tourism Bureau does a great job. In our state, the Arts and Culture Division is actually merging with the tourism this year. So
Wild
there's,
and wonderful.
yeah, there's a lot to explore in all those realms. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I will tell you on the population side of things, though, the census will tell you, that we've been steadily declining on our numbers. But you're right. It's like a more complicated story because you wonder how long of this new sort of trend of people finding us till it actually shows up on the, main set of demographics that would show up in a census as, when does it level off?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the new population's contributing, and so that can also feel different than maybe what the numbers show, right? If you've got
Right,
folks that are
right.
coming into the
Just
community like,
enter.
hey, I live
Yeah.
here now, I want to get involved, right? Is very different than I've been here for generations and I'm tired and I want to leave, right? That's a different feeling.
Yeah, it's so
Um,
wild too. Like and then this, I don't want to, I know you want to take the conversation maybe somewhere different, but the young folks in our community, I was just talking the other night at that entrepreneurial showcase of the research on the textile industry. she's creating pathways for young people to have a reason to stay or a job or a career path that they could consider staying here for. But we were talking about how when I was growing up around here, no adult ever presented to me a picture of what success could look like that involved
Mm,
me in West Virginia. It was always like, if you want to be successful, get out of here as quickly
go
as you
somewhere
can.
else. Yeah.
And that's still the story. I'm told that that's still what, I mean, I'm sure there are some exceptions, but in
Yeah.
general, and how do we, I'm a big fan of young people getting out and going to school, doing their traveling, but considering bringing what you learn
Boomerang. Yeah.
back home. I mean, even if only 5% of the rural, you know, exodus returns, we would have a big impact.
Yeah, the boomerang thing is I'm a boomerang too. So I left and we won't this isn't about me today, so we're not gonna tell my story, but there's a lot of mirroring that my story has in regards to leaving and seeing all kinds of things and then coming back. And there is a real value in that. And I would encourage, folks in communities to be thinking about what you have to offer people who have left but may be very interested in what you have to offer when you come back. Laura, I want to trace back really quickly to something earlier. You mentioned the hub. Did the hub find you, or did you find the hub?
It's interesting. In the very beginning of our work, we were like searching for conferences to go to. And I remember reading the newspaper one time and I opened it up and I saw West Virginia Arts Assembly. And so all of us artists went upstate. You know, we went to Charleston, our state capital, and it was like a really exciting day. And all of our relationships were have been building blocks ever since then. And at that very event, I met an artist that told me, hey, what you all are doing reminds me of this group. They're called Create West Virginia. They were creating a conference around this book called The Rise of the Creative Class.
Yep.
Written by Richard Florida, and they had all these tech people and folks talking about culture and how to attract and retain young people. And they were meeting in Charleston, so I went to that conference, and I'll never forget meeting Kent Spellman, who's the founder of the West Virginia Community Development Hub, and it was along the same timeline as when we were, starting our work. And he suggested that we should enter in the Blueprint Communities program. Robert and I were so stretched with our volunteer capacity that, we weren't able to do it at the time. But another big key of the story is a gentleman named Greg Puckett. He's now one of our county commissioners. He had the nonprofit Community Connections, and his mother was my principal in school. Greg
Love it.
had antennas up. As soon as Robert and I were here, Greg reached out and asked me to come and talk to a group of kids at a youth summit, asked Robert to photograph, and we bonded, and he became a core partner of this work. But he wanted to go to the next year's Create West Virginia conference with me, and I got to introduce Greg to Kent. And I remember it was like at the moment feels like I saw sparks flying, and I
Mm.
knew that it was just a moment. And so it was the capacity of community connections that was already set and that had the foundation for us to apply to be a blueprint community. And it was that partnership that was the foundation. And so I think that we found the hub, but the hub also found us.
Yeah, yeah. And I want, folks to hear from that is that I think it is really important to get out a bit, right? I think you're rooted in a place, but your state, right, your region can often provide you connection points that are going to be really valuable. And you may not know the resources that exist in your region and in your state, and you may not know that until you go to a conference like Create West Virginia. A version of something like that probably exists in your state or exists in your region, and show up, right? Show up, get out there, because what can happen is what you're looking to do can align with the goals of others. And so, and one of the things I also really want to point out to folks in regards to the RiffRaff story is also scale. I know you all give everything to this, but it's been able to get as large as it has because you all took incremental steps. And I'm guessing, right, that if you had in the beginning looked at what it is now, that would have felt probably next to impossible. But it was taking those incremental steps to get there, I would imagine, right?
Well, I want to say two things. First of all, to answer that question, it's interesting because we totally envisioned that we would be.
Okay. Okay. I love it. I love it. I love
Didn't
it.
think it was going to take us as long as it did.
Good.
Uh, that was the surprising point. But I want to say that as far as the building blocks goes, I 100% think that a network like the Community Development Hub, and all the regional development authorities and all the different community development work that's happening out there, it's such a layered ecosystem. And when you
Yeah.
walk through a door, there's like 12 more that open, and you just keep walking through those doors, and it all is such levels of building blocks. And if we had, like, 5 hours, I could sit here and tell you about how every opportunity that we have today, you can trace it all the way back to just walking through those doors and receiving opportunities as they come to you and seeking them out, and being curious about what's next, and maintaining relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
RiffRaff is a collective impact success story. And so in that too, this is an interesting moment, right? This is an interesting moment. We've got, although it's uncertain, right? That seems to be the word right now. There is all kinds of kind of funding shifting on the national level. And I know that you all recently received an NEA grant. You guys have received NEA grants in the past. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship to that federal funding and what you're thinking about right now.
Yeah, it is like kind of like just walking forward and like in molasses, just very slowly, just sort of like trying to really pay attention to the shifting landscape, and be there for maybe other organizations that are new to the funding landscape that might you know feel the ground shaking beneath them and not sure which way to go. I know that the Appalachian Regional Commission has been a cornerstone of the hub's work and a lot of our work that has really helped us move forward. And our, one of our major opportunities that could change the game for us this year is related to the ARC. So that's, a source of just stress. It's all super stressful.
Tell me for listeners what the ARC is.
Sorry, that's the Appalachian Regional Commission.
Okay.
And yeah, I know that with NEA, it's very interesting to see that the new priorities, some of the new priorities that the ARC, I mean, that the NEA is focused on now, which are, supporting the HBCUs, supporting the economic development of Asian American communities, uh, supporting Hispanic serving institutions, which all feels very much in line with, equity priorities that we all care about.
Sure.
It just seems like it's kind of hard to understand, like what, it seems like maybe it's just language nuance, but then
Yeah.
of course all the people that are receiving the termination notices, it's devastating for so many people. And I think that even more than the dollars, it's the morale of, when you get an NEA grant, it feels like such validation and affirmation. And I know that stamp like of approval on your work can open a lot of doors. I think people who have spent their life working towards goals, not just in the arts field, but in like solving hunger issues and, after school for disadvantaged children, all the, layers of life work that people have worked all their lives for, and then to have it invalidated and almost make you sound like talk to you like you're a delinquent or something, like
Yeah. Yeah.
doing something wrong. I just feel like it's just such a devastating blow to the heart of everyone.
Well,
Um,
you've been working in a particular system with a certain particular set of rules, and then suddenly it's like we're just gonna sort of take all those parameters and rules away, and now, I will say though, is just sort of a vote of confidence in what I've learned about you and I've learned about RiffRaff is that I think that your entrepreneurship, your understanding of the importance of connecting to a network is is going to serve you all incredibly well. Like you're going to be okay. I think that these dollars shifting are very serious, and I don't want to sort of say that they're not because they are. But I do think it is important, I think today, and we're kind of hearing about the the for-profit, nonprofit setup, right? Investment in real estate, being able to have kind of consistent programs that people can kind of rely on and count on and turn to. All of these things I think are going to be really important tools for you as you're sort of moving forward. And I would say for others who are facing this uncertainty right now, I think there's a lot of nuggets of hope and potential in what you all have been doing, and I think there'll be probably versions of patchwork, right, that you probably will do moving forward too to kind of continue to build the bridge that you're building. So, I think, yeah, you were gonna say something, Lauren?
Yeah, I do just want to make a note on that. You're so right, and like kind of from the very beginning of knowing that it was like a patchwork quilt putting it together, but you know, sponsorship, corporate
Hmm.
sponsorship of events.
Yeah.
I think in this moment, maybe some nonprofits, I know some smaller arts nonprofits in our state may not even kind of really think about all the different ways or have been, encouraged to think about all the different ways that they could fund. But there's so much value in what we bring to the community. And I think the sponsorship side of, arts programming and events programming, really looking at all the ways that businesses can do benefit from and could benefit from the visibility of what our programming brings. I definitely encourage people to, I'm sure people are already thinking about event sponsorship, but there's creative ways to lean into that I think this moment calls for. And I'm always happy to explore any of this. If anybody ever wants to shout out and bend my ear or share a conversation about the different ways that we fund things, I'm always open for that.
Well, and I'll share too, Lori and I've been talking about trying to set up a regular call with some rural arts leaders. And so I'll sort of put that out into the ether right now too, to reach out to either of us if you're interested in that, in sort of a monthly gathering of conversations about what's next and how we should do how we can continue to do what we do. And I will share too my own experience. I here in Lynchburg, Virginia, we lack local government funding. And so what we have had to do in the face of that, which I think is often a barrier for a lot of arts organizations trying to do their work, when that doesn't exist, what we have done is we have built this really strong relationship with all the corporate entities in the community. That's very strong. We know everybody really well. We also learn about their businesses. We have to care about them as much as they care about us. I've learned all kinds of things about the industries here. We spend a lot of time talking about how we benefit their workforce, quality of life, and so they've replaced a lot of that public funding that many organizations benefit from in other locales. So I share that, for you to hear from Lori and I that there are other resources and there will be new resources out in front of us. We just have to figure out where they are and how to get them. And a lot of this is about getting out into the world, getting to know who's in your community, who's there, who has interest, who benefits from the work that you do, and who, and because it's a big ecosystem. And in these smaller communities, that ecosystem is even in some ways more distilled and clearer. And Yeah, I think as we wrap up, I might want to do a follow-up later to kind of find out what you
Please.
all discovered in this coming year, because it is a moment where I think what I would encourage people really to do, and I just wrote a blog piece that is coming out soon, about this idea that I think it's important for us to, yes, I think, push and fight for this funding that may be at stake or drifting away from us, but it also would probably be a good idea for all of us to begin to think about maybe some other ways that we can do the work that we do, that doesn't quite look like the old model, but looks like a new model. And it's very easy for me to say that, right? But I think RiffRaff is a real inspiration for this because most of us as outsiders would not say, I am going to go to Mercer County, West Virginia, and I'm going to start a dynamic arts ecosystem, right? Um, and yet you all did and have done something really incredible that now clearly is deeply rooted in the identity of Princeton, and something they're really proud of. I'll share too. When I was doing internet research ahead of this, there's all kinds of examples where the local community is lifting RiffRaff and Lori and Robert up as an example of what makes them great. So remember, you have power, you know, and you have something special to offer, and there are people that are going to want to support that and make that happen, you know.
Really appreciate that. That's so nice to hear. And if there's anything that stands out that you wanted to forward to me, I would love to just be aware. That's very sweet to hear. I will say that, we were mentioning with other communities and thinking in this moment, especially arts organizations, about getting outside of the kind of box of the maybe nonprofit arts funding that we've been used to. I think when National Endowment for the Arts coined the term creative placemaking about 20 years ago, from what I understand, they did that because they understood that the arts had the ability to partner with all these different sectors, and it had the ability to, stoke economic development and, bring health and healing to communities and all these different things that the arts were capable of, and they deserved support from all those different sectors. And so they coined the term creative placemaking and intentionally built a field of creative placemaking so that we could have access to that support. And meanwhile, at the beginning of our work, I, was so fortunate to learn about the West Virginia Community Development Hub. And I'd never heard the term community development before. I remember being at a hub event, it was called Hubbapalooza. And there was a gentleman getting a Lifetime Achievement Award for community development. And he said, as he was accepting the award, I've spent 20 years trying to explain to my family what I do, and they still have no idea. Like, community development is such it encompasses so much community building, and sometimes the word development has a lot of connotation to it because of, the negative kind of connotation of what can happen with development. But the realm of community building and community development, there's so much in that, in the realms of like healthy communities and
Yeah.
what does like a family resource network look like, and even prevention and recovery, that field, because a vibrant community that has a lot to look forward to is less likely for the kids in that community to fall down negative passive behavior. So just all the different cross sector thinking that the NEA and all these different organizations have been trying to get us to do. Now is our moment. We have to lean into that and remember, like,
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point too, because I think in many ways, even those of us, right, who maybe have not received an Our Town grant, the Our Town program, right, inspired all kinds of funding for similar types of projects, and then culturally created a lot of activity where arts organizations began to look at themselves as community development tools, and not just purveyors of fine taste. And I think that that is what I would really encourage everybody to take from this conversation today, is that, you are the, I always love the Brecht quote, art is not a mirror held up to nature, it is a hammer with which to shape it, right? So this idea that we we have some facility here, right? We have the ability to shape the world around us through what we do, and we have the ability to impact the community beyond the superficial. So I think no matter what happens to the NEA, right, we should be thankful for the lesson it was teaching us. And their funding was so minimal and has always been minimal. They can't give funds, Our Town grants, to everybody, um, but there are ways to replicate what they were trying to instill in us, and help us understand, our value. So I think that's a really important, and it may be a good note for us to wrap on. Well, Lori, I just want to thank you so much. This is RiffRaff is really an inspiration. It's a fantastic model. I probably going to be connecting with you more too, to learn more about the business model approach of the LLC along the nonprofit. I'm really interested in kind of sharing with the community other ways, other paths, of how to do this. Along with like mutual aid networks and things like that. I think this is the kind of thing we need to be thinking about right now. So thank you. And I will say, for anybody, right, going through the Shenandoah Valley or moving through the mountains of West Virginia, you should definitely stop off in Princeton and check it out. It looks incredible.
thank you so much. And I can't wait to come visit you there in Lynchburg. And
Yeah, we got to do it. You're super close too. When I was looking at all the information, I was like, it's an hour and a half from Roanoke. And I was like, well, that's just an hour from here. So I was like, it's not that far. It's super
and I
close.
vote for a quarterly podcast discussion between us.
What's that?
I vote for a quarterly podcast discussion.
I think maybe that's my new podcast model here. I think maybe we're gonna have to do it. And I will say again, just to plug too, Lori and I are gonna work on putting together a monthly cohort of people to talk. So reach out to us. Lori, thank you so much. I really appreciated this on all kinds of levels.
Right back at you. See you next time.
See you next time. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Town Big Arts. Remember to rate and review us and share with your friends. To learn more, visit us at smalltownbigarts.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirshner.